vengeance!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the blue sprinklers on, alright. Well, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network. Welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we go over this past weekend of road racing across the world. So, the big winners this week, Lewis Hamilton, Joseph Newgarden, and Martin Truex Jr. Let me introduce you to the panel I have assembled tonight, which is not those three gentlemen, but instead I've got Mr. Gray Warren, Mr. Seth Eggert, and Mr. Richard Youden. How are you guys today?
We're doing terrific.
Doing
How
good.
about you?
Doing
It's a
great.
close second between those guys and ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, you and Hamilton are almost interchangeable, so.
Wow. Wow. That hurt.
Wow.
That hurt.
You're the president of
I mean,
Lewis
the bank
Hamilton.
account's a bit similar, but that's where it stops.
That's the big difference, yeah. So, all right. So, man, a lot of just interesting reactions coming out of the race weekend, and one of the most interesting that I want to talk about a little bit is Alexander Rossi and his aggressiveness. And it's funny, I was reading some post race interviews and whatnot, and Takuma Sato, that's Takuma, no risk, no reward. Sato called out Alexander Rossi for being extremely aggressive. Okay, so if Takuma Sato is calling you aggressive, I mean, you got to be pretty darn aggressive. Now, Richard, you've worked with Takuma a little bit. Man, what are your thoughts on this Rossi being called out for being overly aggressive? I personally, I think it's good for the sport. I mean, he wasn't penalized. But he's making it hard to get around, and he's going to push you out of the way too. So, what are your thoughts? If Takuma thinks he's aggressive, my gosh.
Oh yeah, now for sure. And firstly, I just want to Takuma is a great guy. He's a fantastic guy to work with. He's very down to earth. He's great, and but he does he pushes the limits. And we saw in the Indy 500 a few years ago with him and Dario, wasn't it, that he sort of went for a gap that maybe wasn't there. He does everything he can to be successful. And I watched the race this weekend, and what are my thoughts on some of the moves that Rossi was pulling off? There's a difference between being what I would call assertive and what I would call dangerous. He was putting his car in a position which made the other drivers have to change their driving style or their driving line or whatever it may be. I don't think at any point he did anything dangerous. Now, I mean, that track is a classic one for being particularly dangerous if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I don't think there was any real scenarios this past weekend where I would think it was dangerous. I just thought it was. I don't like the word aggressive. I just think it was assertive.
Yeah, I mean, the guy wants to win a championship, and it's funny because he reminds me of Takuma, and then the other guy who was, I guess, the victim, right, of Rossi's aggression was Robert Wickens, who really did have a lot to say. Sato said he had planned on talking to Rossi. I mean, him and Rossi were teammates last year. They get along quite well. Wickens said he had no plans to talk to Rossi, but rather said karma's a bitch, was kind of what he had to say. As in, later in the race there, Rossi mysteriously had the shims on his front suspension fall out. I don't know if that was a result of his aggressive driving or just a flaw in the car, because we saw his teammate Zach Veach have the same sort of issue, which made me kind of hope that Hunter Ray was going to be able to hold it together there. But Hunter Ray, again, brilliant drive for him, leapfrogs from fourth to second in the championship, based on the strong second place behind Joseph Newgarden, who was untouchable all day. Newgarden still lies, I believe, fourth in points. He's got 3 wins on the season. He's leading in wins, but his non-wins have not been, they've been out of the top 10. So championship battle, tightening up at the top there. Dixon is pulling away, and Dixon is all over the news this week because it has come out that McLaren is interested in Scott Dixon to be their lead driver for their IndyCar effort next year. And Dixon has confirmed, indeed, that McLaren has contacted him. Now, Dixon didn't say any more than that, other than the fact that he is focused right now on this year winning this championship, and it'll be later in the year till he really has time to think about that. But the thought of Dixon out of a Ganassi car after being with the team since 2002 is kind of hard to wrap my mind around. And the other thought that I have is that everyone was pointing that we might see Alonso full-time in the McLaren IndyCar next year. And Zach Brown has recently said that they really like to keep Alonso in Formula One. So, and on top of that, there's rumors that McLaren on the Formula One side has been talking with Daniel Ricciardo about replacing Alonso should Alonso decide to go elsewhere, which would be the IndyCar team. So this just a lot of idle talk going around here. So Gray, Seth, you guys heard some of this? You have any thoughts on any of these potential moves, or you think Dixon's probably happy where he's at?
It's hard to say. I'm sure, Dixon and several other people are probably going to be approached by McLaren before it's all said and done. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Will Power and Newgarden weren't, they ask them. It doesn't hurt, to ask people anything if they're interested. Of course, obviously they're in a good situation. Pagano, he'd be another one that might be tempted. So yeah, I think that deal, if it the pot gets stirred more and more, and we don't know that it's going to become a reality yet. It's while we're talking in the potential for it right now. So who knows what'll happen?
I think that it's interesting that they're going after Dixon. I mean, I think if McLaren are going to do this and come in, which I think is pretty obvious that they are coming in to run a team in IndyCar. I don't know the contract situations of some of the guys you mentioned there, like Will Power and Joseph Newgarden and guys like that, but I don't think they're going to want to come in and upset the establishment by trying to poach guys that are under contract for 2019.
Right now, Dixon is in a contract renegotiation year. Dixon is a free agent, so that's the interesting wrinkle there. And the other thing is, if you read Alex Zanardi's book. He kind of highlights just how cheap Chip Ganassi can be, and I really have a feeling that without the target money there, that McLaren with their resources will be able to offer Dixon money that will make his eyes, also what money he's never seen the likes of before.
And you look at the guys. Well.
It'd be a fitting end to his career if they came and really paid him well to help get them started for sure.
Certainly, yeah.
Who's gonna field that team? Is it still Andretti? Still the main?
Well, it's not. It's not confirmed. Matter of fact, Michael was talking about it this week. Obviously, they like to go with Andretti. They partnered with Andretti for Alonso's 500 effort, year before last. And but Michael said the decision hasn't been made, and he said they really need to make a decision within the next next 60 days or so, next 45 to 60 days, so that there's enough time to have it set up. So, and then the thought is it just one car being added, or if they're hiring Dixon and Alonso to have a 2-car effort, which puts Andretti in a situation of fielding 6 cars, which I believe is just overextending it a bit. Although 5 cars with McLaren's money is definitely doable, and if anybody can do it, it's the Andretti organization.
So here's a question for you. Very quickly. Why do McLaren need to go with a partner in this? The resources that they've got and the engineering knowledge that they've got. I mean, because let's not be unrealistic about this. You take an IndyCar team. They're probably, Andretti and Penske are 2, and Ganassi, there's 3 big teams. But they're probably a tenth of the size of somebody like McLaren. You take some of the highly skilled engineers at McLaren, or McLaren can, hire pretty much anybody they want. Hint, hint. They could go out there. I've been thinking about this. I understand why they went with somebody at the Indy 500 last year, because obviously it was a one-off thing. But if they're going about it themselves, then why do they need to partner with another team? It's not like they're designing parts and they need knowledge about how the car works. It's a single seat.
Yeah, it's a spec car. Yeah,
I think it's more of a. You look at coming in with an established team. You're going to get their resources, and it's less resource. You can bring all the technical stuff to bear and augment what they've already got. But there again, McLaren doesn't have to commit to brick and mortar and buildings and a lot of overhead. They can basically do it with their technical expertise and their equipment and augment what Andretti's already got that he's made investment in.
But McLaren already have a very, very large physical presence in the US. I mean, they're the company that makes all the common ECUs for both NASCAR and IndyCar. So in terms of physical structure, they probably could find an area. I mean, again, you look at the McLaren Technology Centre in Woking in the UK, and you compare it to the facilities that Penske and Andretti and Ganassi have. I mean, what you basically run an IndyCar team out of a shed compared to what McLaren are used to running out of. So
it is interesting. Yeah, but my thought is that they only want to do the partnership for 1, maybe 2 years, and then just in order, I guess, to acclimate themselves to the series. Because you figure Andretti's got how many years of data on these tracks, and they've done a lot of the being the Honda de facto factory team. They've got a lot of the engine. So I don't know exactly why they won't just jump in on their own. But if you look at some of the other smaller teams trying to get in, they're doing it through these technical partnerships. Shank is aligned with Schmidt-Peterson and whatnot. So.
But I mean, again, in all fairness, you compare Shank to McLaren.
To McLaren, exactly, yeah. So, but we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But like I said, again, Michael said they need to, if they're going to make a move, they need to make a decision, within the next month. But anyway, that's all interesting to talk about. But then the other one is Alonso. Is he staying in Formula One? Zach Brown says he'd like to have him in Formula One. If he's committed to winning the Indy 500 and getting his little Graham Hill Triple Crown, that's going to mean he's going to sit out Monaco again. Will this Renault engine be a winning car for them? So far, it hasn't. It hasn't changed their situation at all. So I don't know. And then
I think it's interesting. I think you look at Alonso's body language, and sometimes it's very hard to read. Sometimes you think, he's going to IndyCar, he's coming over here for 2019. But then you also look at it and you just think, this guy just isn't done with Formula One. You just get this impression that he is not prepared to walk away just yet. And I mean, he's 36, 37, so even if he doesn't come into IndyCar until he's sort of 38, 39, he's still well within his prime in the IndyCar circle. And the guy's reactions and the guy's driving ability, as he showed by single-handedly winning Le Mans a few weeks ago.
Single-handedly, huh? Wow.
If you look at all the reports, I mean, there was nobody else driving that car, was there?
Yeah.
So,
unless you read the Japanese newspaper,
well, yeah,
they've got a little different spin on that there. So
yeah, but no, it's you do, you know. I don't know. I think he'll be in that McLaren in Formula One next year. I genuinely do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other folks that kind of feel the same way, which is maybe why we're hearing a name like Scott Dixon being discussed for the IndyCar effort. So, but anyway, so speaking of the Formula One, right? They had a race on a was that a spirograph? I was watching on the TV. Man, it just all the painted lines at the new Paul Ricard circuit give me a headache trying to watch that race. But man, you know,
it looked like an old TV test pattern.
Yeah. Plenty of runoff room though, in which they needed that on the opening lap there. So, so you guys get a chance to see the little incident on the opening lap that you know, Vettel got a little channeled his inner Alexander Rossi, I guess, to put Bottas off the track, and then there's carnage behind him with Esteban Ocon, and I want to say maybe Grosjean was involved as well.
Gasly was caught.
Pierre Gasly, Wacky Races guy, yeah. So, but then Vettel gets a penalty, and he does a decent job driving back through the field. But at the end of the day, the Mercedes folks are upset that he wasn't penalized more. So, I mean, whichever one of you three guys want to chime in on this penalty fitting the crime, go ahead.
I mean, let's make a start. Let's start on it. It wasn't aggressive driving. He didn't deliberately try to put Bottas out the race. He made a mistake. He locked his brakes. You know, he was being, assertive and trying to make a move up to the inside into turn one. And he actually backed out. He actually let Valtteri take that place going into turn one and simply locked his brakes. He didn't drive into him. He didn't try and force him off the road. He didn't try and put someone in a dangerous situation. He purely made a mistake. And to that extent, I think the punishment is maybe a slightly lenient, but I don't think you'd want to go much further than some of the things that Mercedes have been talking about. You know, I mean, the guy made a mistake. And for somebody like Vettel to make a mistake, it shows you how hard these cars are to drive. Yeah, I'd say if it was deliberate and aggressive, I'd maybe have a slightly different opinion.
Yeah, and if you ask me, right, the damage to the car and the extra pit stop and falling to the back, that's penalty enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they got a little bit lucky with the fact it was a safety car, so you could catch up with the tail of the field. But I mean, it's racing. Come on, you've got to do this. If you stop people from doing that, then it's like the go-kart racing your kids do, and they got bumpers all the way around every corner. I mean, come on.
All right, so the other interesting thing I thought about the French Grand Prix wasn't that the ugliest trophy you've ever seen?
It was different, wasn't it?
It was a tri-colored gorilla. A gorilla.
I think they were trying to take a bit of inspiration out of. Is it Dover where they have the
rock monster? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And then somewhere,
so they're trying to get a bit of inspiration from that. But it was a little bit. Let's think of something really, really French.
A gorilla.
I mean, they could have.
A gorilla is French. Okay,
or a baguette or something. But no. A gorilla. Because there's plenty of native gorillas in France.
Sure, yeah. I mean, they could have just put a mime on the trophy. That'd look very French. Marcel Marceau on the trophy. So, but I don't know. Do you remember you remember the SpongeBob trophy from NASCAR a while back?
Oh yeah,
Kansas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Giant SpongeBob, the SpongeBob SquarePants 400. Yeah.
SpongeBob SquarePants 400.
Yes, quite a race. Hey, you know what? If you're going to pay for the title naming rights of the race, hey. You have it your way. So, I mean, because there's
any trophy you want. That's right.
Any trophy you want. I think one of my favorites is, of course, the grandfather clock in Martinsville is one of the most unique ones. The guitar that you would get when you won at Nashville when that track was still a thing. And then the other one I really like is the giant lobster you get in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Yep, it's not a tray; it's an actual lobster. So, but the French flag gorilla was an interesting one. So, but let's Let's talk about the other kind of neat deal this weekend. Martin Truex Jr. Scored his second win in Sonoma, his third win on the season. So now there's only all the multiple winners this year are coming from just the two teams, right? Or three teams, rather. Truex is the three race wins. Kyle Busch 4, Kevin Harvick 5, Clint Boyer 2. Truex is kind of making it known that he's not going to let Kyle and Harvick run off with the thing. He's 2 races in last year with then the way he pulled off the win was pretty interesting, and he did a little sneaky son of a bitch stuff and made Harvick and them think he was going to pit, and then he didn't pit. You guys take me through it because I thought it was pretty interesting, but you could probably explain it better.
It was all the crew chief, Cole Pern, and they didn't plan this prior to the race. They tried it in stage 2 and it didn't work. But when they did it in the final stage of the race, Truex honestly thought he was pitting. And it wasn't until they got right before the pit commitment line that Cole Pern said, stay out. And about half a lap later, once about a third of the field pitted, Cole Pern came on the radio and said, we're pitting in 9 laps.
Yeah, I mean, it was a gamble. Everything, you can do that, and when you see that coming out, you don't know how this race is going to unfold because basically the last 6 races they've had at Sonoma, there's been a caution inside 10 laps to go, and that's a trend, that all these guys look at, and that's what some of them were betting on, that there was going to be a late caution. Everybody runs that race backwards. And when they get in windows is when they come to pit road. Harvick did a similar situation last year and won the race, and he won the race by I forget what the margin was, but it was rather large. It wasn't 22 seconds like it was this time, but it was still a rather large thing because they parlayed pit strategy to work, and it just so happened that the thing fell their way. So it's good you sit there and look, but you got to play a hand and be committed to it, and they were, and things fell their way, and they were able to win the race.
And last year, just touching on that real quick, Harvick had about an 18-second lead or so, but the record books won't show that because the race actually ended under caution.
Right. When
Casey Kane lost his brakes going into turn 1 and knocked down the Jersey barriers.
Yeah, but he would have won. He would have won handily. Yes, that's right. But that's what I mean. It was he pretty much he used strategy to get that big lead.
And I just want to say, Cole Pern doing that as well. Cole Pern was doing that with the injury. He actually hurt himself building a treehouse back home. The corner post fell and hit him square in the head, right above the eye. And being a former hockey player, he just shrugged it off and put a bandage on it and went back to work.
Maybe getting hit on the head gave him that brilliant idea for the pit strategy. So anyway, the Sonoma, the top finish, Truex, Harvick, Boyer, Chase Elliott with a good run there, and then Kyle Busch. So you've got all our usual suspects up there near the front, and still Chevrolet winless since Daytona, huh?
Yep. Yes, and this is actually the longest winless streak for Chevy since 1981, and for General Motors for Chevy since 1971, and for General Motors since 1981.
So what's going on with the Chevy teams? Is it problems with the new car? Is it just the stars aren't aligned? The Fords and Toyotas have better packaging, or the Fords are aligned with better teams? I mean, usually we've not seen this kind of one car being left out a victory circle this long in NASCAR, particularly how they fight for parity. I know that Toyota won a bunch of races last year, and Ford's winning a bunch this year as well as Toyota. But it's I'm just wondering if there's something wrong with that new package, or if it's just the way the chips are falling.
I think it's money more than anything.
So okay, yeah, I was thinking that the you look at Stuart Haas and you look at the Joe Gibbs. There's some of the two of the best funded teams in there, but the Hendrick team has got good money coming into it still, and they've
does it have as much as it used to? I mean, you look at it, they're not going to be getting as much money from Nationwide as they were when Dale was driving it.
But they're paying out so much less in driver payroll though.
Oh, that's very true.
Yeah, I think it balances out. You figure what they're paying all the teenagers that drive there. Jimmy's their only big salary left, and they got all the young kids there. That's freed up a lot of money. That's probably making them able to keep it together with the smaller sponsorship values. But Lowe's is still in for as much as they ever were. It's just that their last year of it. So it's just mind-boggling that like we talked about it off the air. That Jimmy Johnson, is he still driving NASCAR? Usually you can count on him. At least one win every 4 to 6 weeks, and maybe more.
We talked about this earlier in the year. Personally, I still think it's tech inspection. Not that Chevy isn't trying to think out of the box or anything like that, but the new optical scanning station is still keeping the playing field so level in the sense that the cars have to be almost exactly the way they were presented to NASCAR by the manufacturers. And keep in mind, I don't know what the situation is at Richard Childress Racing, but I know Hendrick Motorsports is one of the few teams that still does not have an optical scanning station of their own to test out whether or not their cars are actually how close they can get to, say, crossing the line.
So you feel like they're playing it too safe? What do you think about that, Gray? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this.
I don't know that they're playing it too safe, and I'm surprised that Hendrick does not have a. I know if we've got one at RCR, I'm surprised Hendrick doesn't have one because you got to know what you've got going into these races, and when you go to the racetrack. I'm a little bit befuddled at what Chevrolet is going through right now. They touted this Camaro when it came in, and they worked on it for 2 years prior to the rollout and all of this and all that. There may be some aero deficiencies in it. I don't know that's all of it. Right now, Ford has made a major commitment over the last 2 years in their race teams. They stepped up when they brought Stuart Haas into the fold. Of course, Toyota, we know about their investment in the sport. I just think I'll go along with what Richard said too. I think some of it is Chevrolet's getting outspent a little bit right now, and that's part of it. And the Chevrolet teams are lacking a little bit. I think they'll come back around. We've seen some good runs from Larson. We've seen some good runs from the 9 car, Chase Elliott. We've seen Jamie McMurray run well at times. They just haven't been able to put anything together. We're 2 races from starting the second half of the season, and I expect to see Chevrolet make some gains as we go forward and go to some of these races. These guys aren't laying down on the job. They're still working and trying to figure some things out, and I think it'll come. But I think too, it's not so much that it's Ford, Chevy. You got to look at the 3 dominant teams that have won the majority of the races going back into what. Almost this same time last year. Stuart Haas, Joe Gibbs, and Furniture Row. they have been the dominant teams, and I don't care if one of those three teams was operating Chevrolets, they possibly would still be, one of the dominant teams. I think that as a group, those teams are just well oiled and well heeled right now, and are dominating the sport.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just kind of thought, like last year about this time, I would have thought that maybe, like young Kyle Larson, who was really been improving so much the last couple of years, and the Ganassi team had been improving so much. I would have thought he'd have come out of the box so strong in 2018 and thought he would have contended for the championship. But he's just kind of been, he's been there. He's been in the mix. They just, like you said, they just haven't been able to put it together.
They haven't been able to close. They haven't been able to close the deal.
Exactly.
And some of it they've shot themselves in the foot. But I tend to look at the dominant teams. The saying is the cream rises to the top. And I have a feeling that if Stuart Haas was fielding Chevrolets, they would still be successful with that. I feel like Joe Gibbs. Those teams right now are hitting on all cylinders, and they have got their act together. They're preparing good race cars and bringing great equipment to the track week in and week out.
Absolutely. Now, Seth, you want to jump in with a comment before we move on to something else?
Actually, two quick comments. One, Truex this past weekend, that was his 18th career win. And since joining Furniture Row Racing, that's his 15th win. Just to speak to the dominance of that team and the two others. But my one main comment is, with Ford switching to the Mustang in the Cup Series next year, should we expect the same troubles that Chevrolet is having if they're overthinking their car like Chevrolet may have? Or should we expect them to hit right out of the box?
Well, I think you got to look at what teams are gonna be fielding it, just like I just talked about. Teams with the experience and the wherewithal and to do this. I think I don't think we'll see quite what we're seeing right now, and we may see Chevrolet, see Hendrick and Ganassi and RCR catch up a bit. The pendulum will swing again, no doubt about it. But I don't think. I think right now with you're seeing a team in Stuart Haas. They've got some things figured out. Other than Aero, those cars are working really well. I think they've got. I think that those teams, as well as the Joe Gibbs teams, have really got an advantage when it comes to the chassis right now. They've got some things figured out because those cars turn real well. They come off the corners well. They roll through the corners well. That's a big part of the game, and that's where they're beating a lot of people. Richard can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you go back to it, and we can talk about this, who's got this and who's doing that, and who's where people are sort of positioning themselves. But no matter what NASCAR tries to do, it just purely comes down to money, to my mind. You look at the last four champions. You've got Harvick, you've got Busch, you've got Truex, you've got Jimmy Johnson there. All of those teams are leading. Stuart Haas, the Joe Gibbs and Hendrick, they're the three big budget teams, and of course Furniture Row, they're in such a unique situation that they've probably got more people working on one car than some Cup teams have on two or three cars because of the way they're set up. And when you see Ford move over to the new bodywork next year, I think they'll be in a stronger position than Chevrolet were this year.
And that's right. I think same thing. I think that with the groups that they're going into, they'll be strong. I don't think we'll see the fall off that we get. Chevrolet hadn't really invested in any new team.
No,
they've retracted. They used to the 78 used to be a Chevrolet team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but also you look at this. You sort of. Yeah, I talked about this a little bit before. You look at the top 5 Chevrolet drivers. Okay, you got Jimmy Johnson and Kyle Larson. Then who's third on that list?
Yeah, that's debatable.
Chase Elliott.
Yeah,
but
he's 2 or 3 years. But then you do the same with Ford. Okay, you name the top 5 Ford drivers. You could do that a lot easier. You go to Toyota, you name the top 5. It's far easier.
Right.
And that's part of it as well. You can say what you like, but at the end of the day, the guys have also got to get the job done. And if Chevrolet aren't investing in the driver's side of things, which I know comes from the teams, but it's also a lot of Chevrolet money goes into its individual team. And you also have the consideration that Chevrolet do split their resources between 2 main Chevrolet organizations in Richard Childress and Hendrick, whereas Toyota, they're basically Joe Gibbs and Furniture Row, and Ford are their own entity in the way, and they have like Roush and Penske and Haas working for them. So it's I think Chevrolet do need to look at how they structure their Cup Series setup. I think they probably could do things a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And they're trying to do some collaboration, but we're not seeing any fruits from that.
Nobody ever
collaboration right now.
Nobody ever really collaborates these days.
Exactly.
Sometimes, I've seen it. Collaboration can be worse for the teams overall because they'll give you what they want you to know, and then they'll keep what you want to be kept, and then so you get this situation where you're thinking, oh well, what we've got is gospel, and in fact, it's only half the story, and you end up going down a blind path. So again, I think that Chevrolet is a little bit lost at the moment, and probably need to realign themselves.
Yeah, like you said, Chevrolet has had the same roster for a number of years now, and has not changed. In fact, they're actually probably, as far as the top team, they're probably down. One team when you consider the 78 has 78 has moved on to Toyota, and of course the Chevrolet. Richard Childress is only fielding 2 cars, where in the past they were fielding 3 to 4. Ganassi has remained firm. You've got the situation over at Hendrick where you've got one senior driver, essentially in Jimmy Johnson, and of course you've got one that's got 3 years experience in Chase Elliott. But then again, you got the other 2 cars essentially with rookies running that. So that's a big that's a lot to overcome when you consider what the Ford people have in their stable and their driver lineup. That's a ton of experience that they bring to the table. Look at the guys driving the Stewart-Haas cars, and then you've got what Penske's got over there. So yeah, there's a lot of talent in that Ford pool right now, and that's what's and the Toyota pool, and that's what shows week in and week out.
All right, so NASCAR is off to Chicagoland next, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
And the big news out of Chicagoland, if you believe NBC, is the biggest story to come out is going to be Dale Jr.'s debut in the booth as the coverage moves from Fox to NBC. So, and we've seen Dale here and there and everywhere. They sent him to the Olympics, and they sent him to the hockey playoffs, the Stanley Cup Finals. They've had him on their afternoon daily show. So, Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the booth. What do you guys think? Yay or nay?
Well, I think NASCAR and I think NBC are hoping it's gonna result in a little bit of a rating spike, and it may very well in the first few weeks. We've got Chicago coming up, and then follow that up with the Saturday night race, July 7th, from Daytona. So we'll see what that does. See if it spikes viewership a little bit. But then again, we're up against the dog days of summer too. So we just have to see if that does help the ratings a little bit. But I'm sure.
In all fairness, that tells you everything you need to know about NASCAR when a different announcer in the booth increases your ratings.
Yeah, well, that's what they hope. I'm sure. They want to see if that's going to uptick, have a little bit of an uptick in the ratings right now. And everybody, all motorsports ratings are down right now. They were, some of them are woeful. I think I think yesterday's overnights for Sonoma was a 1.9, and I'm sure the IndyCar race, as good as it was, didn't draw nowhere near that. Probably was under a 1.
Yeah, IndyCar is usually under a 1. Yeah,
under a 1. I mean, you're talking
9, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking like the Texas race was 900,000 viewers, and that is a paltry number when you compare. Even though NASCAR numbers are down, they're still doubling and tripling what IndyCar is doing, and that's a shame too. And it's just something that's going on right now. I don't even know what F1's ratings are. Do you, Richard? Have you seen any?
I don't. I mean, I think now with they're offering so many streaming services and other ways of getting it, I think the numbers that you see, through typical,
broadcast
media,
TV,
are interesting. But here's a quick number actually. So I just found something here. 2017 is when the latest numbers are, but there was a 13% rise in the US in 2017. I don't know what that was from, but
was it from Haas entering? I don't know.
Yeah.
Although, real quick on the ratings, it is better than it has been in some senses. And the reason why I'm saying that, I specifically remember an article, the year that Reinhard Ray won the championship in IndyCar, the Fontana race that year only had a .2 rating, which equated to about 200,000 people.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one that was a night race in Los Angeles. So on the East Coast, right, we're all still watching it at 2:00 in the morning. It was, it's a horrible time slot on a Saturday night, So it didn't start here till like 11 or something. So, but yeah, the ratings aren't great. And Formula One, I mean, they even though they've got the contract with ABC, ESPN, I keep seeing that it's on ESPN News or ESPNU or ESPN2, which are in less households than ABC or ESPN. So, but the nice thing that they're doing with that is they're showing the Formula One races commercial free, flag to flag, which is really unprecedented and is quite nice actually, because those of us who enjoy watching racing on television, we know that as soon as we go to commercial is when something significant happens in the race. 9 times out of 10.
Although I will say this past weekend, not only did they show it on ESPN2 commercial free, at the same exact time as the IndyCar race, they re-aired it commercial free on ESPN.
Okay, so they put the afternoon time slot on the network with more. Then they played it a third time late in the evening. I remember that. Just they played it again at maybe 11 p.m. So I mean they're trying to get their money's worth out of it, but the whole commercial free thing is pretty neat. So now let's getting back to Chicago. Let's make some picks for Chicago, and then let's go back and revisit the Formula One and IndyCar weekends again, and talk about those races a little more detail. Then we'll make our picks for those. So for Chicago, 1.5 mile oval located in Joliet. Gray, who do you like?
Oh, I'm going to go, being we're going back to the 1.5 miles, I'm going to say we're going to see the same the cast of characters vying for the win there. Let me see, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm going to say Mr. Harvick.
All right, and Richard?
Keselowski
Been winless since the Daytona race. Yeah, I'd like to see him pick one up and get a spot in the chase. So, Seth?
I'm actually going to go with the driver who has the best average finish at Chicagoland, and that's Chase Elliott.
Oh, that's just boring.
Well, I'm just going to go with the guy who's won more 1.5 tracks in the last 2 years than anybody, and I'll say Martin Truex. So I'll say Truex goes 2 in a row, matches Kyle Busch's win column. So, all right, now that we've picked all those, I'm sure Kyle Busch will win the race. So, anyway, is that a night race, Chicago, or is that a Sunday afternoon?
I think it's Sunday afternoon.
Okay. Now, also in Sonoma, we had ARCA in action.
ARCA was in Gateway.
No, okay, so K&N was in action in Sonoma. K&N. So our friend of the show, Jesse Awuji, was in that race. We had talked to him about it last week. Seth, do you have any results coming out of the K&N race?
Jesse finished 15th. He spun late and stalled it, getting it back going, lost the lap. Will Rogers actually beat Eric Almirola, Eric Jones, Daniel Suarez, Alex Bowman, and I forget who the fifth Cup driver was, but he ended up beating the Cup drivers who were much more experienced. Granted, they were running that race to get more experience, but Will Rogers, who is essentially one of the proteges of Kevin Harvick, pulled off the upset against the Cup drivers and won. And one quick side note on Jesse Awuji, if anyone hasn't checked him out on Twitter, I suggest you do so. He actually posted a story earlier today, Monday. He helped a family earlier today. He stopped on the side of the road and pulled them out of a burning van.
Golly, yeah, that's pretty. That'd be pretty scary to see a burning van as you're driving down there. So, I mean, that guy continues to be a hero, huh? He's a pretty neat guy. So, now let me ask you this real quick. So, yeah, we had 5 Cup drivers in that K&N race, okay? Which is, they've had this move in the Xfinity limit the amount of races that the guy doing trucks in Xfinity. Is there a limit to how many K&N races they can get in? Because I know most of them don't. So I guess it's not really an issue. But it was interesting to see that many Cup racers in a K&N race.
There is no limit in K&N. Kevin Harvick ran earlier this year, I think Tucson. I forget what track it was. But there is no limit for K&N. NASCAR is currently debating whether to decrease the limit from 7 races in Xfinity down to 5. But they are keeping the limit for the Truck Series at 5. So as far as the limits are concerned, they're likely here to stay for the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series.
Yeah, and the other two, it was also announced that NASCAR has no plans to use the aero package like they used at the All-Star race in any races for the remainder of the season. So that is out, and probably we won't hear anything about that until next year.
Just real quick, as you were saying earlier, asking about ARCA. ARCA was in Gateway. Chandler Smith, 15-year-old, ended up winning the race. And the Truck Series were in action at Gateway as well. And Justin Haley pulled off his first career victory.
All right, good for him. Another odd side note, they are bringing in massive truckloads of dirt to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and building a little, I think it's a quarter-mile dirt oval inside the Turn 3 area, which that would be the Snake Pit area for you folks. And they're going to have kick off the Brickyard 400 weekend with a little midget race. You guys catch wind of that news?
Yeah, I saw that. They're gonna run in the third turn. They're gonna have a dart show prior to the Brickyard 400, hopefully to create some a little bit of buzz and some more people coming into town for the race. Yeah, I saw that.
Right. And
so which
I'm sorry.
Which race would be attracting fans to which race? Which race would attract the fans to which race?
Well, I mean, it's just
it's hard to say. Yeah.
Bring in some support. Bring in some support stuff to get them. And I mean, I give them credit. They're trying to do some things to kind of spice up the weekend, and that's good. Give the fans a little bit more bang for their buck. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, it should be fun. I mean, there's going to be, a very small scale little track there on the inside of the turn there. They're going to have some portable grandstands around there, but I guess that what I heard, they're going to try to get some big names there. Robin Miller was walking through the IndyCar garage at at Road America, seeing if any of the IndyCar guys would be interested in doing something like that. And most of them had the same answer. A lot of them said, yeah, that would be a lot of fun. But my car owner or my sponsor or my wife won't let me do that. So, but the only one is Gabby Chavez. He said, oh, yeah, I'm there, ready to go. So, but that'd be neat to see. So, back to talking about IndyCars then. So, IndyCar, Road America, this is their third year back after a 10-year absence. They announced they're signed on through 2021 now. The event has been quite successful. They said they had upwards of 50,000 people for race day. I think just a little right at 100,000 for the 3-day weekend. So, I've been to Road America, and the fan base there are very knowledgeable about IndyCar racing, and it's kind of sad that we didn't go there for nearly 10 years, but they're back, and it looks like this one's here to stay. It's a driver's favorite track. It's a fan favorite track. It's a very fan friendly track. It's one of the few tracks that when you buy your general admission ticket, it also includes access to the paddock included in the price there. So for the price of admission, you get to walk through the garages as well. You know, most tracks will hit you up for an extra $100 for that privilege. So, but the race itself was again just dominated by Joseph Newgarden. This guy's had an up and down year, but just like at Alabama earlier this year, he just got to the front and was nearly untouchable all day. So we've got Iowa coming up, where Newgarden put on a clinic 2 years ago, and led nearly every lap there when he was with Carpenter Racing. But the other guy who's got, I think 3 wins at Iowa is the guy who's now second in points, is Ryan Hunter-Ray. So looking forward to a good race in Iowa. They got a weekend off in between, so we'll make our picks for that next week. So now, Richard, do you want to run us through any of the dangling Formula One news coming out of the Spirograph this week that we didn't touch on before we say our goodbyes?
Very little, really. I mean, this was the first weekend of Formula One's first triple header. So they were in Manicourt. Oh, goodness me, that makes me old. Manicourt. No, Paul Ricard last weekend. This coming weekend, they're at the Red Bull Ring in Austria, and then the following weekend they're at Silverstone. So first of this triple header weekend. I mean, I think all the big teams at least will have that pretty much down. I can't see there being much issue there. We touched on it briefly. It's like McLaren went nowhere this weekend, especially in qualifying. Both Van Dorn and Alonso didn't make it through Q1. Williams, again, were terrible. Then Lance Stroll had a tyre failure at the end of the race, which pretty much meant the race finished behind the safety car. Or was it virtual safety car? I'm not quite sure. I think it was virtual safety car, wasn't it? So, yeah, it was good to be back in France. The crowd looked great. Renault sent a lot of people there.
And Renault did quite well. All things considered, I thought Sainz looked pretty darn good.
Yeah, he sort of got up there and then realised he was fighting against the big boys and then sort of retreated into his shell a little bit. Charles Leclerc making it through to Q3 for the first time for Sauber since 2015. I think it was fantastic drive. I mean, that guy's stock is rising by the week. I mean, goodness me. I mean, you won't, you almost wouldn't surprise you if before the end of the year Raikkonen just turn around and stick his middle finger up at everybody and walk away and Leclerc lets his seat because the guy is really, really schooling Ericsson quite severely and making a name for himself. Kimi made the podium though, saying that I think it's 26 podiums since his last win, which breaks a record or increases the record he's held for a while now. So, yeah, it wasn't a bad race to be back in France. I think the talk of taking that chicane out the backstretch, which was so confusing. I mean, how those drivers found their way around that, I'll never know. I mean, it did look like trying to navigate a Walmart parking lot half the time. There was that many lines and colours and squiggles everywhere. It was, it was almost being hypnotised.
But, I know.
And it was interesting, actually, to see how... this the runoff area, because everybody thought, the coloured runoff area is just to sort of denote the French flag, but the blue stripes apparently in the runoff were a medium friction surface, and the red stripes were a high friction surface. So, the idea of, if you got into that red stuff, it would slow you down, but it would screw your tires pretty badly. I thought it was an entertaining race, and hopefully they'll make some improvements. I know there was some transportation issues for the spectators getting in and out of the track. But these things always happen with a new circuit, or the first time they've been back there in a long, long time. So
1990, I believe, right?
Yeah, 28 years since we were there last. So that place has changed, beyond all recognition. So it'll be interesting to see going back there next year what changes they make. I mean, I did read a statistic of something like there's 1,600 possible circuit combinations there, or something ridiculous like that. So they could just pick a circuit, can't they? Really, combination. You could have a whole championship on that one track, couldn't you? With all those different combinations.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a giant slot car track. I don't know.
I mean, when Bernie bought the place in the mid '90s, he turned it into this high-tech test track or whatever it's called. We've used it when I was working for some of the teams. We used it in the early 2000s, and it was a fantastic facility, apart from Bernie would charge astronomical amounts of money for basically every utility you could ever imagine. I think even toilet roll was like $2 a roll or something. It is good. It's good to be back in France, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, again, you're talking, France has a long history of racing and car manufacturers. So one on France definitely belongs on the Formula One schedule. So we're off to Austria next, and that's this coming weekend. So, you want to make a pick for Austria?
I keep saying this every week, and 1 week Bottas.
Okay, all right.
I think what you could see really in the next, these 3 weekends, though, the France, Austria, UK race, you could easily see Hamilton win all of those and basically walk away with the championship. I think these 3 weeks could be the defining period of the season.
Yes, as it generally is during the Formula One season. Yeah, this stretch is paramount to the
post Canada and pre-shutdown. Yeah.
Yep. Seth, who do you like?
I'm gonna go with Lewis Hamilton.
All right, and Gray. Gray, you have a pick for Austria?
Let's see. I'll say Vettel.
Vettel? Okay, so that leaves me Ricardo. So I'll go with Daniel. And then with that being said, just one more bit of news before we go off the air. Some sad news. We learned that Jason Johnson, World of Outlaw Drivers, lost his life this past weekend. The guy was a multiple champion, owned a team with Stenhouse, won a lot of races. A lot of folks knew him, met him. So our hearts go out to his friends, his family, his fans. Rest in peace, Jason Johnson. With that being said, I'd like to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I'd like to thank iHeartRadio. I want to thank you, Gray, Seth, Richard. Appreciate you guys coming on. And I want to thank all you folks that tune in and listen every week. Again, my name is Frank Santoroski. This is Drafting the Circuits. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.